everyone. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Today is the fourth and final session of Thriving Thursdays, a panel discussion on coping during COVID-19 to promote emotional and physical well-being. In our previous 3 sessions, we spoke about stress related to the pandemic and explored some effective ways to overcome it. In today's panel discussion, we hope to focus on how it has impacted our education community and especially children. We will speak about how to take care of ourselves in these stressful times and stay prepared. Thriving Thursdays is part of a larger initiative, Collins Cares. I would like to give a brief introduction here. Collins Cares is a comprehensive health and wellness initiative through which experts will share information on how to maintain or improve well-being through proper diet, exercise, stress management, and illness prevention. With this, we want to reach out to our larger community of educators, teachers, parents, and students. In each of these roles, all of us have undergone immense stress adapting to new ways of learning and teaching. As your learning partner, Collins has designed this wellness initiative to help you cope in these difficult times. We want to promote wellness in a holistic way, so we're focusing on occupational, mental, physical, intellectual wellness, which is why under the rubric of Collins Care, we have planned various webinars, blogs, workshops, and panel discussions. In this last session of Thriving Thursdays, which is a part of the Collins Care, which will be a larger program, we have invited 4 esteemed panelists to provide insights and answer some of our questions on how to cope with the stress that COVID-19 has brought in its wake. It is my honor to introduce our esteemed panelists to you. Welcome, dear panelists. I'll now give brief introductions to all 4 of our panelists. Mrs. Amrita Burman, she is Deputy Director, Sunbeam Group of Educational Institutions. She has been associated with Sunbeam for over 27 years. She holds an MA as well as an MBA and has been trained in educational leadership under the aegis of Harvard Graduate School of Education. She works with a team to guide the academic and the co-curricular transactions at Sunbeam Group. She has traveled widely and has been part of delegations abroad several times. Most particularly, she was part of the FICCI Arise delegation in London and the Microsoft World Educators Conference E2 in Paris. In addition, she is also a published author of educational books in English. They are numerous, so I'm not mentioning them here. Mrs. Geeta Dalal, she has also done Thriving Thursdays with us before. She's a clinical psychologist and special educator and dyslexia therapist. Her work has positively impacted innumerable children and their families. She has a master's in clinical and industrial psychology, a B.Ed in special education, and dyslexia. She is also a certified arts-based therapist. To add to the long list of her laurels, ma'am is also a brain gym and movement-based learning instructor and a drum circle facilitator. Welcome, ma'am. Mrs. Sarika Nair, she's the 3rd panelist for today. She is a nutrition and lifestyle consultant and avid blogger. She has conducted workshops in nutrition for various corporates, educational institutions, and has completed the prestigious Dale Carnegie Train the Trainer program. She has won several awards, including the most prominent upcoming dietitian in Mumbai International Healthcare Awards in 2017. She has featured on many websites and newspapers, including My City for Kids, Mint, The Indian Express, and Dainik Bhaskar. She's also associated with Lifeline Hospital for nutrition for expecting mothers. And finally, our last panelist, Dr. Shruti Ghatalia, prominent pediatrician, neonatologist, which is newborn care, respiratory and allergy specialist with Shanti Healthcare, Mumbai. She's also associated with several other hospitals in the city. She has over 20 years of experience as a pediatrician, having trained in Mumbai, Vellore, Ahmedabad in India, as well as in the USA. Dr. Shruti is the National Master Trainer for Pediatricians appointed by the Indian Academy of Pediatrics and has presented papers and given scientific talks at various state and national platforms. We would like to keep this panel discussion very concentrated on certain areas that we want to explore because we have received a lot of comments and questions from our larger community. So I will address each question to each panelist, and let us go through those questions. Welcome to all my panelists, and I hope we have a meaningful discussion today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So my first question, I'm directing my first question to Amrita ma'am. Ma'am, what has been the drastic impact of the pandemic on teachers, students, and consequently the entire education system?
Good evening to everyone, and I'm absolutely honored to be a part of this panel, and I think it's been very beautifully designed because we have a very diverse panel, and I'm sure that, you know, from whatever we hear from each other, it's going to be benefiting each one of us, because I could make out each one of us in some ways connected to the child. So I'm so happy that we are talking about the children who are possibly the most spoken about right now once the third wave is being spoken about. So just to let you know about my own experience as a teacher, as an educator. Well, if we talk about the teachers in particular, or in fact the education sector in particular, it's been a very tough time for all of us. And though it's been a very enriching journey, but it's been tough because it's been a complete paradigm shift. What we were doing, you know, pre-pandemic was something that was so traditional, which was happening. Of course, we were using technology, but I think the best schools in the country realized that the technology we were speaking about was nothing compared to the technology and the advancement that was really needed, or let's say the technological skills of teaching and learning were very different from what each one of us were doing. So obviously this impacted the teacher, the student, the complete education sector. So if I were to use a few adjectives, you know, on the emotional front, since we are talking about the emotional care and the physical care, it's been draining. It's been stressful. It's been enriching and enjoyable at the same time, but it's been very, very demanding on teachers. It's been very demanding. There are a lot of reasons for this. One of the main reasons is that suddenly, because the classroom went inside into every home, all teachers were under the scanner. They were under the watchful eyes of parents. Previously, many things teachers would do with all good intentions in the classroom, but the questioning wasn't so much, because there was always a screen. So the parents didn't go like heavy on you. What are you doing? And, you know, everything wasn't exposed. Let's put it straight. But then suddenly every teacher, good and bad, there were respect also for the teacher that really grew. But at the same time, for many teachers, especially during their struggling time, the first part of the first wave, it was very tough because they were completely under the scanner. They had to start learning all over again. As I mentioned, there was a complete paradigm shift. So, you know, they started learning because they realized that you just couldn't be replicating what you were doing in your classroom. The skills were different. So each one of them started struggling and then learning. And as leaders, we really had to not only encourage them, but we had to handhold them. We had to really take them through this journey. So it wasn't very easy even for the administrators in the education sector. Of course, for the teachers, it was tough, but even for the leaders, because you had to be visionaries, suddenly had to think very differently compared to what you were thinking all the while. Now, the same thing is about work from home. Now, it was tough for everyone, but for teachers, it became even tougher because number one, you were struggling with technology, home, space, especially from the kind of schools, you know, the kind of schools that I'm representing, where you have the lower middle class coming as students and as teachers to a large extent. You had space problem, you had device problem, you had Wi-Fi problem. The work and home balance became very, very tough and very stressful for all of them. Online security and privacy was another major issues because they really didn't learn technology very well. Neither could we really teach them too well. They had a lot of issues because they had Zoom bombing or people just entering and chat boxes being filled with absolute filth. So slowly, of course, everybody learned better. But even today, number of teachers suffer from, this issue of privacy and security. In fact, I personally had issues where parents were in the same room. The teacher is teaching and the parent is actually changing his clothes at the back, and I had to intervene. And with all good intentions, even parents didn't know how they needed to really kind of behave. Or let's even say they also had space issues. So there were some practical problems. It wasn't always harassment, but there were practical problems, but it did harass the teachers. Financial stress was a big problem, because since schools shut down suddenly, fees was not coming, and salary cuts, people losing jobs, husbands losing jobs while you were teaching, big issues with a lot of teachers. Grief was a big issue, especially in the second wave, because you lost your loved ones, or you were home with a COVID patient, you had to teach. But though most of the teaching community was very, we were really good to all of them who were suffering, but some of the schools were not really as understanding as possibly the more understanding schools. So teachers had patients at home, and at the same time, they were teaching. So just to end, there were two more issues that I wanted to speak about. Working hours, there was nothing like working hours, because the stress was put by leaders on their teachers to connect with parents and teachers at all odd hours. And parents started connecting with the teachers at all odd hours. So that routine also went out of their lives. At the same time, the other major issue was when it came to the teachers. Most of the teachers, it's a very women-dominated industry. Most of the women, you come out of their homes not only to earn a living, but also because they needed their own space and they needed to let out their issues. They were not moving out, and that led to a lot of strain on the teachers. On the students' part, total lack of routine, total lack of physical activity, too much of screen time. Schools were overdoing it, didn't know how to handle it. So obesity was a big problem. Postural issues were there. Grief was a problem even with children. Financial issues, parents were losing jobs again. At the same time, poor online teaching, there was no interest. Huge learning gaps. They didn't know where to begin, where to end. So what was going on so smoothly sometimes on the offline, with all great things about the online, there were a lot of issues, and children were really suffering when it came to learning gaps. They really missed out and are still missing out, and the gap is only increasing as far as certain skills are concerned. The reading, writing skills have really taken a beating. Most of the parents, most of the teachers are complaining about that. Some sort of a variety in the children's lives. They loved their music, they loved their dance, they loved their practicals, they loved, just doing something different, stepping out of their basic classrooms. They couldn't even step out of their homes. Children were really, really missing that variety. So on the whole, in the education sector, if I would say, great loss of good teaching time. Skillful teaching time has been lost. Learning gaps have really increased. What we have today are stressful teachers and children, and I think withdrawn kids. Many kids, we don't even know where they are. They're not even picking up the phones, and we are desperately looking for them, because I think the technology has hit them hard. Not everybody could connect the way probably children from slightly more privileged families could connect. So this total paradigm shift was a little difficult for teachers and students to handle. The struggle is lesser today because many ways have been found out, but the struggle is still there. This journey is tough, and but I think most of the progressive schools are trying their level best, but it's left a scar nonetheless.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much for those insights. Actually, it's quite alarming to get some of those insights, but it's very important to get those. I would next like to direct my question to Geeta, ma'am. Ma'am, after we have understood this impact of the pandemic on teachers, can you tell us in what ways has the pandemic affected mental health, particularly anxiety, the burnout, fatigue, a lot of screen time that children, and this is something that we as working parents also need to understand. This increased screen time, all this fatigue and anxiety, what has the effect been of the pandemic on our mental health, and especially on our children?
Thank you for that question, and Amrita ji, that was really awesome. So she has really put across in a nutshell what the stress levels have been for teachers and for students, for parents, for people staying at home, for people working outside, who were stuck to working inside. Now, as far as your question is coming, it's a total burnout. It's a total burnout. For one reason, which Amrita ji also said, that there is no sense of time. There is no sense of time. There is no distinction that this is an office hour and this is a time to relax. You know, it is not happening, and it is not happening for everyone, be it an adult or be it a child. Okay? As far as screen time is concerned, as a counselor, I was the one with every parent that I met in the school. I used to ask them, you know, how much screen time do you allow? And I would say, this age, maximum 1 hour, which included the research that was supposed to be done for 10th standard, 11th standard, 12th standard. This is what I used to advise. Now, I have to eat my own words because there is no option. So children can't sit across the screen for so long. And she did mention about posture. So the toll that it is taking on physical health, on posture, is completely in a negative manner, because there is no sitting erect. At least in a school setup, people could tell them, you know, let's all sit straight or let us all exercise. But here, the teacher could mention that, and I'm sure they all are, but then the screens are off. The camera is off. And miss, my camera is not working. They will put in the chat box, my sound thing is not working. What am I supposed to do? Or my Wi-Fi is off. My bandwidth is low. I need to log out. I need to log in again. So the teachers are not only dealing with the teaching technology that they have to adapt to, they've had to learn. Why just teachers? As a counselor also, my job was all face-to-face, because I need to see the body language of the person with whom I'm talking. If needed, with permission, I need to have my hand on the shoulder or just touch the hair or the head, with permission, of course. But I still needed to do that. And here it is just all across the screen. So screen time is for a toss. Posture is for a toss. The eyes are going, I do not know which way. So if, like she says, the person is privileged, they are sitting on huge devices, the vision, peripheral vision is this much. If it's a smaller laptop, the peripheral vision is this much. If it's an iPad, the vision is going this way. And if they are looking into a telephone and studying, their vision is this much. So if you think about it, that for a horse you put blinders, you know, the horse has to go this way and that way. But if the horse has to look this way, which way is eye teaming happening? So like Amrita ma'am said, completely I agree with her, that reading requires a lot of physical skills also. One of them being eye tracking and eye teaming. Everything is going for a toss. And stress levels, because there is no end in sight. I would put it as an ABC, that it started with anxiety. People adapted to it. In the second wave, it has now led to boredom, whether it is adults or children. And the third thing now, as a counselor, my responsibility is coping mechanisms. So this is what I would put in a nutshell as the A, B, and C, and the way in which world is going. This total ambiguity. So, you know, that lack of predictability is really causing not only burnout, stress, anxiety, and of course leading to panic attacks.
Thank you so much, Geeta ma'am. Actually, you brought to light a lot of these issues that I think we were not aware about. And really, thank you so much. You've given us a lot to think about. Next, I'd like to welcome Sarika ma'am, because of her specialization in nutrition. The pandemic has affected everyone's lifestyle and also our eating pattern. Ma'am, what are some of the ways, what are some of these aspects that you'd like to highlight about nutrition and our lifestyle? especially in the wake of the pandemic?
Thank you, Yasmin, for having me in the panel. And it was good to hear to Amrita ma'am and Geeta ma'am. And they are right in whatever they're saying, that it is happening. And the boredom that Geeta ma'am said has set up when it comes to your food also. So see, I would say that the nutrition, the eating habits of ours have changed. I would divide it into phase 1 and phase 2. So phase 1 was last year when the pandemic started. So that time everyone was, we'll enjoy the time that we have got, and we'll cook something new, and, we'll spend time together, and we'll now have a health plan in place. And everyone was eating well and cooking and, trying to, and that time the takeaways were also not there. So people were actually cooking more and eating. So the shift was from eating junk to eating home cooked food. And people were very conscious of drinking their kadhas and taking vitamin C. So it was a good shift. But then this time what has happened, because of the boredom, your restrictions are eased, so you can order food. So it is a COVID fatigue that we can call, and the boredom, and people have taken to like junk food with a vengeance. So now people are bored, they're tired, they don't, like ma'am said, they don't see an end in sight. And they are now munching, basically. So most of the time we eat out of stress or out of boredom. And because there is no structure in our lives, no structure leads to more munching. So when you are bored, you don't know what to do, or you are in front of a screen, you tend to munch and you are eating mindlessly. So this is the shift. There are still people who are conscious and trying to take in their vitamins, but generally now people are tired. And they are tired of how much more effort can I do, because this time it has hit us worst, the second wave, and a lot of people know someone who is affected or lost someone close. So this shift I see has happened. Now the gut and the brain are connected. And like Geeta ma'am said, your brain is getting affected. Everybody's mind is getting affected. And similarly, your gut is not healthy because you are sedentary. Most of the time we are inside the house. Physical activity is almost nil. So like ma'am said, posture is affected. You are bored and anxiety hai. So yes, all these things are also related to your gut. So gut and brain have a connection. So, it's one thing leading to the other, and we are stuck in that cycle. Because of our sedentary lifestyle and digestion being affected, most of the people's digestion is affected because we are so sedentary. We're like sitting for hours. Back pain, other things are also on the rise. And so eating junk is it's like adding fuel to the fire. We are not eating well. Our digestion is already affected, and it is affecting our moods. So there are healthy food. If you eat healthy food, it also regulates your mood. People associate food generally with weight, weight loss or weight gain. But food does so much more. And nutrition is so much more important. It is way beyond weight loss. And right now, people are, because they are bored, they are not paying attention to it. But what I would suggest is, it is too late to build your immunity if you're sick. You have to start before. It should be a preventive measure, not a curative measure. So I would say that you have to eat well, even if you're bored, or because the pandemic has not gone anywhere. Now we'll hear doctors speaking about the third wave. So we know that it is not going anywhere soon. And what we can do is build our immunity with the food and all the ancient wisdom which has come to the front now. We have to do that, and there is no option to it.
Thank you, Sarika ma'am. Actually, you've given us a lot of insights, and it's true. The first wave, we were all cooking and doing exciting things, and we were happy that, we have so many opportunities to learn new things, but the fatigue has definitely set in the second wave. Now, I'd like to welcome our final panelist, Shruti ma'am. Ma'am, I would like to ask you, what is the psychological impact on patients, caregivers, and especially children? Because from your perspective as a doctor who deals with young children, so when they fight COVID-19, or say they see someone in their family going through COVID-19, what has been the psychological impact on them? What has been your observations on that? Ma'am?
Thank you, Yasmin. That's a very pertinent question. And we had some amazing insights from Amrita ma'am, Geeta ma'am, and Sarika ma'am. And thank you for having me on this panel. So, with the COVID-19 pandemic, there has been a parallel mental health pandemic which has come in. If you realize, over the past 1 year, almost everyone to some extent has been affected mentally because of this abnormal situation. So let me start with the patients that we see. As soon as they find out that they may have some symptoms of COVID, the first reaction is denial. Then there is bravado. I cannot have it. But eventually, when the tests come in and they find out that they are COVID positive, there is a lot of panic, anxiety. Gradually, the patient goes into depression. We start thinking negatively. You've heard all the news. You've heard mostly negative news and very bad stories. We never hear the good ones of how people struggle and come out. So your thinking goes into that negative spiral and it pulls you down. So the first reaction is, oh my God, now what's going to happen to me? Am I going to survive this? In addition to that, now we put this patient in isolation for 14 days. See, we are social beings. And that isolation has a lot of mental effect. There is no way this person can vent out his or her feelings or can communicate to others what he is going through. And that is very crippling when you are sitting inside going into that negative spiral. So there is a lot of panic attacks happening. A lot of people, really getting depressed. And I would say the mild COVIDs, it's a mind game. Some of them who are very positive, right, as people, they take this as an opportunity. I will talk with my plants. I will pick up my hobbies. I will read good books, and they come out. But patients who are there for a long time, we see that in the hospital, and you are there on a BiPAP and the oxygen level is just not coming up. I think there is a lot of despair, despair, impatience, and you don't know whether you're going to come out of this or not. And so a lot of negative thinking comes in. Also, we have seen that patients who have gone through hypoxia and a lot of inflammation for a long time, fortunately have come out of it. But they end up with a lot of depression for a prolonged time after this. Somehow that affects their brain and their thinking. So that is what we see with a lot of adult patients as well. So far as our children are concerned, first and foremost, once they find out that they are COVID positive, in the second wave, it has been mainly in the situation where some other family members have also been positive a lot of times. So as soon as the child is positive, parents go in a panic attack. So there is absolute mayhem at home. There are others also who are unwell. So they are also angry. They are also upset. They are also unwell. And in that scenario, the child has just heard negative things about COVID. He does not know what is going to happen to him except for the fact that he's seeing my mom and dad are panicking, so something terrible is going to happen to me. And add to that, he cannot communicate what he's feeling. A younger child will not be able to communicate like you and I would. And that would reflect as bad behavior, temper tantrums, depression, withdrawal. They have sleep disturbances. Like Sarika ma'am mentioned, eating abnormalities. They just stop eating or start eating too much. So these are what we see in mild. Most of our children are mild. So those are the things that we see in them. Having said that, children have silently borne the brunt of this pandemic, and beautifully
yes,
so, I would
agree.
say. Yes, and in fact, to a certain extent, I feel any family who had a happy child in the family, the adults have remained sane because of the child. Let me grant them that. We do not grant them enough. They have kept us happy, honestly. But they have had prolonged isolation. You see, they have no friends.
Ma'am, I'm so sorry to interrupt. Could you speak a little louder? I think some of our audience can't hear you.
All right. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? All right. So you see, they have a prolonged isolation, no friends, no neighbors, no school friends. They want to talk to people their age. Okay. And so what we are seeing in them now is a lot of withdrawal, gadget addiction. They have educational performance is decreasing. They are becoming defiant in their behavior, the misbehavior or bad behavior that we say. It's actually boredom and anxiety in the child. So he's just seeing on the news that everybody is dying. He doesn't know whether tomorrow somebody in the family is going to, the same thing is going to happen to someone in the family, but he doesn't know how to communicate that with you, And the younger kids, we find they're becoming more clingy. So now the child wants the parents to do everything. Mujhe khana khilao, you take care of me. And then the adolescents, we find, are having severe mood swings. So they are having relationship issues, excessive anger, they are withdrawing in their own shell. And some of them have substance abuse as well, because it's been a prolonged stress, continuous stress on their mind. One very sad part, I would say, unfortunately, in the second wave, we have had some kids who have lost one or both parents. And for them, it's very difficult to, one, they're very anxious, very scared. They don't know what their future is going to be. The caregiver is not there. And in that situation, sometimes they are not even able to express their grief, and which is really affecting their mindset a lot. So that was about the kids. And finally, so far as the caregivers are concerned, I will put the caregivers in two perspectives. One is the caregiver at home. So the rest of your family. So typically, if one COVID patient is there in the second wave, you will find a couple of others who are also COVID positive in the family. So there is a lot of anxiety, stress, sometimes anger at the patient that he brought in the disease, and now all of us might get that disease. After all, it's a human psychology to feel that anxiety and anger. And at the same time, there is fear for the patient because his family, you hear all the negativity. So that part is for the caregivers at home. So far as doctors are concerned, doctors and nurses have seen unprecedented number of cases. We are seeing such sad situations. We have younger doctors, 20 to 24-year-olds taking care of, even in government hospitals, if you see 50, 60 patients at one lot, you see a couple of patients dying every day.
Ma'am, if I may, I think there is a lot of echo coming from your speaker. So if you could just check.
Okay. Is this better now?
Yeah, much better, ma'am.
Much better? Okay,
yeah.
I think I'll just have to be...
Just the last bit about caregivers.
So, okay. So for the caregivers, let's say the people at home, they are your first caregivers. A lot of our patients are going to be at home. So what happens is, now these people are, some of them also affected with COVID, along with the patient. So they will have all those mental issues that the patient had. So far as those who do not have it, they have one, a lot of fear and anxiety for the patient, and two, sometimes anger on the patient that you brought in the disease home, and the others may get affected. So that is also a human psychology which we see, And if the patient is admitted in the hospital, now let's talk about the mentality or psychology of doctors and nurses. Last 1 year, and especially the second wave, we have seen unprecedented number of patients coming in, And even if we see junior doctors, like there are 40, 50 patients that one doctor is taking care of, someone who's 20 to 24 years old. And this child or young adult is seeing so many deaths every day. This is really harming their mental state. And it's very difficult for them to, accept this situation, although it is part of your duty that you are doing. And second thing is, we are always scared at the back of our minds that we will be bringing the disease back home. So we are worried for our families as well. So that is another situation that doctors are facing and nurses are facing right now. So
thank you, ma'am. Thank you for your perspective on, particularly on caregivers, because you are a doctor and we got that perspective from you and multiple perspectives about how people are coping with this psychologically. My next question, I would like to direct my next question to Geeta ma'am. Ma'am, we understand there's no one-size-fits-all approach to coping with anxiety and burnout, some of which ma'am mentioned just now. You have done some very effective self-care strategies for us in our previous webinars for Collins Cares. How do parents and teachers help children maintain a positive outlook during this time? Could you let us know a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Thank you for that question. And I work with the school setup. So, come into contact with parents all the time. And this question does come up every time. So at our school, we started with webinars for parents on how to start, action at home we took up the model of Howard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences, and then every month we were doing a webinar on picking one intelligence. So suppose if I'm taking body kinesthetic intelligence, we were giving them strategies which they could work on the body part, you know, that intelligence without screen. So the aim was to be parent to help the child without screen. So if we were trying to do linguistic intelligence, we're trying to give them strategies that they could work upon, staying positive. So basically, if it was naturalist intelligence, we took up all the intelligences that way. So idea was that it should be off screen, could be positive methods in which the child is engaged, because anxiety was coming in because of boredom. Social distancing was a major issue, social disconnect. Like ma'am said, man is a social animal. And to think of children, you know, we as adults may still have some prejudices and biases about smiling at this one and not saying hello to this one, or turning our head when that one is walking down the lane. But children are so free, and play is their birthright. So we were stopping them from going out into nature, going down into the building also. So we were restricting them so much. Now, if you cannot play with your friends, then somebody needs to play with them at home. What can they play with at home? So then, again, board games, things which were all locked and kept, you know, those things came up. Now to think of a simple thing like a birthday party. A child looks forward to inviting friends for a birthday, or just distributing chocolates in the school. Now those birthdays were gone. Not one, some of them have missed 2 of them. And children tell me also, ma'am, second birthday is also gone. So now the role of the counselors, which was earlier just curative, that if a person has a mental health issue, we get into action, we help that person into a curative mode, like I'm saying. The roles for counselors also changed. They had to become a promotive role, like I'm saying, increasing mental health via these webinars, these suggestions. And the main struggle for everyone was to think of things that they could do without the screen, because the school was already taking up so much time of screen, you know. So we had to do that. And then, of course, the preventive thing. Like Shruti ma'am said, there are so many people who were affected. There were so many frontline workers who were affected. So if there is a family in which there is somebody who is in the front line, they are affected. So we had to gauge whether they were at risk for any kind of a mental health issue, and get into that preventive role also. So it has been a massive, humongous task. I foresee, I mean, I don't want to sound depressive, but I foresee this problem to continue for a longer time, because while COVID is getting into the 2nd and the 3rd phase, for counselors, it's going to be a different role, wherein the order from the government will be to get back to work, to get back into action. But I'm already comfortable working from home. I'm already comfortable learning from home. I'm already comfortable not using my hand to write, but just using the laptop. So the struggle is going to be getting back to normalcy. So, you know, it has been a two-way street, but I wouldn't want to, you know, dwell too much on what is to come. We will face it. There is no doubt about it. I'm sure every person, every counselor is ready for it. But getting back people, I'm so comfortable, you know, dressing in a t-shirt and attending office. I don't want to wear a tie and a coat. So these are small, simple things. The formal shoes have got fungus because we've been wearing slippers, you know. So these are little things which will have to come back. Getting back into uniform, shoes, socks, arranging those pencil boxes, because total loss of organization skills, I would say, have gone for a toss.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Really, it's quite true. all that you mentioned. We have experienced that at home. And as I'm a parent of an only child. So I definitely, this board game was something that happened for us. It's very true. I would now next like to ask Sarika ma'am. You mentioned in the previous question, when I asked the previous question, that how COVID-19 has adversely affected our health. Now could you, and this is also a question that has come up from our participants today who have registered for the panel discussion. What are some of the foods that will help us boost our immunity? Like how can we improve our health and through nutrition?
See, the most basic thing that we all can do is we all can go back to eating how we ate like kids. Now, it's easier said than done because we're so used to this modified lifestyle. But the easiest thing to go back is how we ate as kids, you know. And our diets in any state of India, if you go, our diets consisted of whole grains and vegetables. And there used to be the seasonal pickle, you know, all these things which we, every summer, matlab, we used to have more of curd. So if we go back to the old wisdom, that is the easiest thing we can do. But as far as immunity is concerned, of course, vitamin C is the hero ingredient, hero vitamin when it comes to immunity. And we know the vitamin C rich fruits are lemons and the citrus fruits, and now lychees and kiwi, guava, papaya. All these are broccoli, peppers. So all these are vitamin C rich foods which should be included in your diet. So have them as salads, have these fruits and include them. But my point is that there are other few vitamins which also we have to take care of and make sure that we consume them. And they are vitamin D, vitamin zinc vitamin, and the B complex group. Now, there has been a lot of research on the role that vitamin D plays in COVID times, especially because it reduces your chances of having a severe respiratory tract infection. And not many foods are rich in vitamin D. Of course, there is cod liver oil. There is oily fish like salmon or mackerel. There are eggs, milk products, and the fortified foods. Like you get fortified milk, fortified with vitamin D, or cereals fortified with vitamin D. What we all can do is we can take in a little sun, at least half an hour. We can't go out, at least from our window. We can do expose your skin, any part of your body, expose your skin to the morning sun and get your dose of vitamin D. Speak to your doctor if you need supplementation and do get that, because vitamin D is emerging as a very important vitamin during these times, along with vitamin
Ma'am, I think your audio.
Next one is zinc.
Ma'am, I think we lost you for
a
little bit. Yes, the last sentence, ma'am. You spoke about the sun being out in the sun after that.
Okay.
Zinc.
Yeah, so I was saying that vitamin D is a very important vitamin. Speak to your doctor if you need supplementation and maintain your levels. The other vitamin which is important is zinc. Zinc is, am I audible?
Yes, ma'am. Zinc is, that's where we lost you again.
Yeah.
Hello, ma'am. Yes, you're back.
Yeah. Sorry, froze. I thought immune system. So when you're building up your immune system with vitamin C rich foods, it needs the boost that zinc gives in. Now, zinc is a vitamin which is available in your nuts, dairy, legumes, cereal. So it is a widely available vitamin, but make sure that you eat your nuts every day. Nuts as a food group is a very neglected food group, a very important but very neglected food group. I mean, we eat it in Diwali, forget be eating nuts to get your dose of zinc. And the other one is B complex. Now the B complex, it has many important functions like managing your appetite and brain function and cardiovascular health. Most importantly, it is an energy giving vitamin, and very widely available in whole grains and legumes and lots of vegetables. Even if you need supplementation, you can talk to your doctor about it. But make sure that you pay attention to these vitamins. And the crux of all of this that I can say comes to, again, eating the way we used to eat. Because what whatever vitamins are covered, they are there in legumes, they are there in fruits, they are there in whole grains and milk products. So go back to eating regular food, and you should be healthy. And don't forget your herbal teas and kadhas that we are taking, which is very good because the weather is changing. It is especially in Mumbai, the weather is being weird. So don't go back to your spices. Have your ginger tea because, like I said, digestion is affected. And I mean the ginger herbal tea, not the milk tea with ginger added. So have your herbal tea, and you should be good. And one more aspect I would like to add is physical activity. So find out what you like, because unless and until you don't move, you won't digest what you're eating, and we don't want to be couch potatoes. So find what you like. If it's yoga, or you see YouTube, we live in good times that way. YouTube is full of, there are so many apps also, but you have to do it, right? We are the horses who have the water, but we have to drink it. So drink that water and pray that you don't fall sick, and work towards it, that you don't fall sick.
Thank you so much, Sarika ma'am. Actually, it was quite enlightening to hear you. And I've made a lot of notes about the discussion. Next, I would like to speak to Shruti ma'am. Ma'am, we are speaking of a third wave. Many of our panelists spoke about the third wave amidst the second wave, which we are going through now. How can we prepare ourselves, and particularly our children, for this without actually scaring them? But we also want to inform them. So how can we prepare them without scaring them? And if you can give us a few do's and don'ts. Ma'am?
See, Yasmin, as Fred Rogers said, often when you think you are at the end of something, you are actually at the beginning of something else. And the COVID pandemic has really tested all of our knowledge, resilience, and management skills. So we must all understand, how does a pandemic work? It comes in waves till 60 to 70% of us become immune, either by natural disease or by vaccines. So in the first wave, we saw that elderly and people with pre-existing diseases got the disease. Then there was a mutation, and we saw younger age group people getting affected, and more children were getting affected or are getting affected in this second wave. Now, by the time the third wave comes, if we are not prepared for it, and I will talk how we can avoid it, but by the time third wave comes, who will remain non-immune? Those adults who are not vaccinated or who have not got the vaccine, the disease, and the majority of our children. And so therefore, the infectivity which went up in the second wave, that mutations may keep increasing and the infectivity goes up in the third wave. And so we have likelihood of children getting affected as much as adults would be getting affected. How severe would that affection be will depend on the mutation that will come along.
I'm so sorry to interrupt you again, ma'am. Could you speak up a little louder? Because okay. I think some of our...
Okay, just let me know if I'm not loud enough, okay? So far, our children...
Yes, that's fine.
That's okay? Okay. So far, our children have been protected because of their immunity and because they have less number of receptors which are required for the virus to enter our bodies. But what we are seeing is that the virus is now mutating and becoming more infective. Statistics are showing that the infectivity of the virus is getting increased. And so we may have more number of people, especially children, getting affected in the next wave and getting moderate to severe disease, which was not there so far. So that's something we need to watch for. Now let's analyze, why did we get the second wave? Of course, the mutation was there, the B1617, which came along, and that mutation has been rampantly spreading the disease. But along with it, we must accept that at the end of the first wave, we let down our guards. The COVID protective mechanisms which were in place, we just chucked them off. We got tired of them, So we stopped wearing masks, or they were functional, nose and the mouth were not covered. We started having parties. We started going out for group picnics, birthday celebrations, kitty parties, kids play dates. And therefore that infectivity suddenly spread across. So then this time, when will we have the third wave? that will depend on how we behave. So it is very imperative that we don't, now we are at the end of the second wave, fortunately, but now how we behave will determine if and when we get the third wave. Okay, of course, the infectivity and mutation is something which we will have to see, but whatever we can do, at least let us not let down our guard now. The second time we were caught unawares, let's not be caught unawares the third time. So how do we prepare for the third wave? Expecting it to come. First and foremost, it begins with awareness. I think let us spread that message as to what to see for your child and when to go to a doctor. Because when the next time, if there are severe or moderately severe diseases, there will be a very small window period in which you will have to pick up and take your child to the doctor. If treated in that time, it's absolutely fine, but we don't want to get late. And therefore, creating awareness is very important. So what happened with the first wave? We had patients coming with fever, cough and cold. In the second wave, now we are seeing more problems. Along with that, we are seeing diarrhea, vomiting, severe pain in abdomen, rash on the body, red eyes or conjunctivitis, joint pains, a lot of weakness. So all this has come up in the second wave. And in a situation, if you have a family member also having these problems, then that is the time you should, that bell should ring and you should go to a doctor, definitely where there is COVID care possible. You know, at least go to a fever clinic. But there are some danger signs, let us hope all of us understand. Because if that happens, you have to rush your child to a hospital with COVID care. And those are, if your child has fever for more than 3 days, your child suddenly, you know, a playful, happy child stops playing, becomes reclusive, stops eating, doesn't drink well, the urine output goes down, that should ring a bell. Again, if your child has a little bit of cough cold, you find the respiration is faster, you make them walk for 6 minutes and check their saturation. If the saturation goes below 95, that is again a red flag sign. You know, and any child who keeps on vomiting, does not retain food well, these are the situations where you must go to a hospital as soon as possible. Now, there is one more thing which I would like all the parents to understand, and that is MIS-C, that is multisystem inflammatory syndrome. You see, this is not COVID, but this is an immune response that your body will give 4 to 6 weeks after you become COVID positive. What has happened this time? Majority, 80 to 90% of our children have been asymptomatic or mildly symptomatic. So a lot of times parents don't even know that their child was COVID positive. Thoda sa bukhar aaya, thoda sa gala dukha, and the story got over. 4 to 6 weeks down the line. So if we are at the end of the curve right now, we are looking at July end or August. That is when we will start getting more children coming with fever, all the above symptoms. In addition to that, red tongue, red eyes, red palm and sole, swelling of the tongue, pain in abdomen, and their organs getting affected. So we have had more children in this second wave who have been COVID positive, and therefore understand that in July, August, you will have more children coming with this problem as well. Even if you thought your kid never got affected. If your child presents with these problems, immediately go to a doctor. I'm not trying to create a panic here, because we understand 80 to 90% of our children are mild or asymptomatic. Only 10% of them have moderate to severe disease. Of those, only 1% will present with this kind of a scenario, and only 0.5 of them would go on a ventilator. And all of them, if treated in time, will get well. Okay, so the point I'm trying to convey is be aware of these problems that can come, and please go in time to your doctor rather than hoping that this is just a fever which will go away. No? So that is it. By then, again, now we are in August, by then hopefully we will have vaccines even for children in our country. You understand, Western countries have already started, US has started giving about 12. For us, we have an Indian vaccine which is in phase 3 trials. And we are hoping that the government approvals will come, and by August we should be able to vaccinate our children above 5 years of age. Okay. So now that we know what are the COVID symptoms to look for and what to expect in future, let's see what further we can do to prepare ourselves for the third wave. Most important, like I said, I will reiterate, preventive behavior is the same for children as adults. And parents have to be the good and the best role models for their children. So these are simple things which we have always been telling about, and they do make a lot of difference. So if you don't want the third wave, what do? Wear a mask, a good, well-fitting mask when you are in public. And children above 2 years should be taught to wear a mask. In fact, you know, there are now the Mickey Mouse and the Barbie, and they really accept it so well. I get patients who come in the hospital and they're so proud to show off their masks and their gloves, you know. So if you tell them and they see you doing it, they would love to do the same thing. In fact, I have kids telling each other, mask barabar lagao. So, you know, they will teach us rather than we teaching them. Secondly, keep their hands clean, 20 seconds, hand scrub. The easiest way is tell them sing the happy birthday song twice over while you are scrubbing, and your job is done. Thirdly, social distancing. I think whenever you go out, still keep a gap of 6 feet between two people. Don't unnecessarily take out your kids for shopping, kitty parties, for birthday parties, for play dates, for hobby centers. Although having said that, let them communicate with their friends, maybe on Zoom or on technology a little part of the time with the family, but try to avoid, you know, getting them out in public as much as possible, and teach them, of course, to sneeze with their elbow or the tissue, and not to touch their eyes and nose and mouth in public. Now, apart from the preventive behavior, what will protect us from the third wave is the COVID vaccine. So I implore all adults who are eligible to please take the COVID vaccine. It helps. Okay. It will, one, protect you from severe disease for sure. Two, if you are protected, at least you will not get it home and not give it to your kids. And having said that, please note, once you take the vaccine, still follow the COVID preventive measures for the sake of your children, because you don't want them to get affected in the third wave. So that is another thing which I would like to convey. And finally, like you said, the do's and don'ts, what to do, you know, in this situation. Sarika ma'am rightly said, now is the time to improve their immunity, not after you get a COVID positive report. So how do you improve the immunity of a child? I think a very simple analogy will be, consider your immunity as a table, and 4 pillars support your child and his immune table. So basically, what are those 4 pillars? First and foremost, healthy food, and Sarika ma'am told beautifully about it. So you have to, there is a concept of my plate. So you can go on Google and see what is my plate and how much carbohydrate, protein and vegetables your child is supposed to take. Okay. All the immunity boosting vegetables, ma'am has already mentioned, and I will not go into details there. So the first and foremost, healthy food. Secondly, exercise. Exercise is equally important for the body to remain healthy. Now, how do they exercise in such a scenario? They cannot go out. My dear friends, just hold hands and dance. That is good physical and mental exercise for the entire family. You know, all of you will remain healthy and happy, especially the kids. Of course, we can teach them yoga, meditation. They take to it beautifully. You can get in a trampoline and let them jump on the trampoline. There are times, you know, when there is no one in the building, they can go up and down the stairs. They can walk around in open spaces, go on a beach, let them walk. There are some societies which have big areas where kids can play. So what you can do is stagger the number of kids who go down. So if there are 20 kids, let 4 or 5 go down at a particular time. So that way they will not be, they will be able to play with a little bit of social distancing. Of course, needless to say, any child with cough, cold, fever will not go to play with other friends. Okay. So the first pillar was your food. The second pillar was your exercise. Now the third pillar, and very important, like Geeta ma'am would agree with me, is mental health and sleep. Sleep, I'm sure, have you all noticed 2-3 days, if you don't get enough sleep, you end up getting a cold. Has it happened to you ever? A lot of us face that. And so we do not, or sometimes we forget the importance of enough sleep and rest to the body. Having said that, mental health is extremely important. If you are mentally strong, there is a mind-body connection. If you are mentally strong, you will not get the disease, or you will be able to fight it better. Okay. What is happening in these days is, we are all at home. We are all working from home. So the child, even within the home atmosphere, is getting isolated. Parents are working and the kids are doing whatever they want to do on their own. So please keep some time to play with your child, interact with your child. Whatever games you want to play, best is to involve them in household chores, whatever you are doing, it's game for them. Let them, when you are doing your making atta, let them play with the dough. It's Play-Doh for them. So involve them and appreciate when they do the job. You can have hobby corners for them, a corner where they can do messy painting or clay work, or put colorful books in another corner. So these are different things which will cut off their boredom. Have a good schedule. So beginning of the day, let them do school work or intellectual work, and at the end of the day, let them play, and appreciate when the schedule is followed. They can also have a gratitude journal. I think it will help a lot. And they can, in that journal, 1, have your gratitudes written. 2, if it's an older child, let the child emote out and write what their feelings are. That will be cathartic for them. Have debates at home, age-appropriate debates, and try to explain what is happening to them. Try to keep them away from news and negativity. I think we are seeing too much of stress burden for all of us. The whole day what we are seeing is just negativity on the news. Music is the soul of the life, So I think along with dance, music will also help. Now 2-3 things, like Geeta ma'am said, have birthday celebrations. A little one at home, but have it. That happiness is required. Also celebrate a patient or a family member who comes back from hospital. Let them have Zoom meets with their friends and their relatives so that they don't feel isolated. 2 more things which we would like to impress upon. In this scenario, we see a lot of family feuds happening because of the lockdown. And in that, a child gets very mentally disturbed. So pleasant atmosphere at home is important. And as a corollary, when you are working, your kid comes and disturbs you, you get angry and the child gets physically abused. That is just not acceptable. So that is something which we have to be careful about. So far as they are concerned, they may have behavioral irregularities, they may behave abnormally, will be irritating to you, but try to understand that they are also going through a lot, and please accept them the way they are right now. So that is the third pillar. We had food, we had exercise, we had mental health and sleep. And the fourth pillar is vaccination, not the COVID. I'm talking about your routine, regular, age-appropriate vaccination. So that has to be your vaccine for all vaccine preventable diseases. Especially in COVID, we advise all children and all people above 50. Now, of course, they have a COVID vaccine. So all children to get influenza and pneumonia vaccine. And especially right now, before the monsoon comes in, if they take the influenza vaccine, at least they will not have viral, like COVID-like other disease, which is influenza, which may come in the monsoon season. So that is the fourth pillar. And in that, I would also add supplements like Sarika ma'am said. If your child requires, let your doctor assess. And vitamin C, vitamin D, zinc, multivitamins, and iron will help in immunity building. So finally, just one word. If your child gets fever, please take a break from your work for 3 days. Monitor your child. And don't forget the danger signs.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for that very comprehensive information that you gave us. And really, many of these things we do go through, but it is nice to see it put together so well in words. And I'm kind of reflecting on things that I myself must have done wrong and in responding to my child. But really, thank you so much. Finally, I would like to talk to Amrita ma'am. Ma'am, as they say, there's a light at the end of every tunnel. Hoping that there is light at the end of this tunnel. Once we emerge out of that tunnel, what do we do? How do you envisage the situation once the schools reopen and we get into the very difficult task of reintegrating our children into schools? So what are the most important things that you as an administrator will do to keep the well-being of your teachers, students, and other school staff? So could you please give us a few insights on that?
So, before I begin, I think we've had some great insights, as I was saying right in the beginning, all diverse areas, but actually they're all kind of converging because we are all speaking about the health, both physical and mental of the children. And I've also taken down a lot of my notes because finally, I think it's this expert opinion that matters when it comes to children. And I think as educators, it's very important for us to be connected to all the pillars that, we've been speaking about, all of us, and seeing to it that there are enough of information that flows to the kids. So I'm really glad that, I'm a part of this. Anyways, now, when it was, let's say, sometime in March, okay, if I'm not mistaken, by about 8th of March, we were very lucky in UP to have started schools. Because we started a little early.
Yes.
School was over, things were doing well. And many other parts of the country, schools had begun to begin. But many of them really didn't start because final exams were over. So what we did, we had a quick final exam. We finished it off because in any case, we thought it's better to call kids back and make use. We never thought the second wave was around the corner, actually. So we had our kids coming to school. So I think I'm in a good position to talk about what we envisage that could possibly happen when the schools reopen because we faced it firsthand. So when we had the schools reopening, we did mention about the novelty having gone out of the window, fatigue setting in. Kids were like crazily waiting to get back to school. So when they came, there were two major feelings that were noticed. One was excitement because you just wanted to get back from that routine and that fatigue and get back to the usual, wanted to meet your friends, wanted to be with your teachers, that human touch, that emotional, that little huggy feeling that you wanted with the human beings around you started coming in. And of course, there was anxiety, both on the part of the children. The anxiety was actually less on the part of the children. There was more excitement, but on the part of the parents, there was a lot of anxiety. So obviously, we also felt the pressure of how are we going to keep our children safe. So what happened the moment we opened, the rules were all over. We took our assemblies, we explained to them, even before they came to school, we took our online sessions and explained to them and told them about the mask and the washing of the hands, etc., everything. But what you noticed is that when the kids came, most of the things actually went out of the window because they got so excited to meet their friends that hug started coming in. And the only thing all of us did as educators was, okay, children, we understand, but you need to be safe the most. And if you want this to carry on for a long time, you just need to be safe. So what I envisage again is when the children join back, the feelings are going to remain the same. Anxiety on the part of the parents and excitement. And as school administrators and as teachers, we have to see to it that we are extra alert. So you'll have your, usual break after a particular class where we used to ask our children to sanitize their hands, wash their hands, try not to eat, reduce the school timing so that, the masks are not really off. So all those protocols will have to be kept. The other thing that we will see is emotionally drained students and also teachers because they've gone through all the tough time that we've all spoken about. So we will be having very emotionally charged people. And what we really need to do is to give them ways of speaking their mind out, speaking their heart out. And whatever little I think people I have with me, especially Geeta ma'am, would know grief handling and grief counseling is something that all educators today, in a very short way, in a very concise way, are going through. And I think one of the pillars of grief counseling is to listen. Children just need people to listen to them. So the challenge that we're going to have as school leaders is, of course, our counselors are there. They are full-time counselors. We have specialists also. But with like a school size of ours, which is about 2,000 kids, just 2-3 counselors won't work. In any case, our teachers were first-hand counselors. We have a concept of pastoral guides. So what we really have already begun to do is have all our teachers go through sessions where everyone can at least listen to children, flag children, and see to it that the ones who really need a lot of help and assistance are sent to counselors for more in-depth counseling. We also have to keep the connect with the parents, because I mentioned to you earlier, we're going to get back children with the total lack of routine. Absenteeism is also going to be a problem, because most of us have been talking about now they don't want to come out of their comfort zone and come to school. We have children with huge absenteeism because they don't want to get up in the morning at 7, 8, whatever time the school starts, which was normal for them, but they don't want to go through that grind anymore. So once the routine goes out of their lives, you have to be in touch with the parents, because you need their help to get the routine back. You also will be needing their help because there are huge learning gaps. You have to take some extra time out to see to it that all the skills, all the basic concepts also that, have kind of taken a backseat need to be got back, because these are going to not only leave, these gaps are going to leave issues of learning, understanding, for life of the children. So when certain pillars are not met, the building doesn't have a good foundation. So children are going to actually start suffering on their academics for much longer, on their personality for almost life. So you need to have the parents when you need some extra time to be given, for extra help to be given to fill up these gaps. Besides that, even with the teachers, to get their high eye back, or with the students to get their self-esteem back, it's very important that we need to be encouraging them, motivating them, allow them to look back with a very positive attitude, because there's a lot that they have learned. There's a long journey that they have covered. So they should not only feel that what we had was absolutely useless and what did we do? And you can't stay with this feeling, because 2 years, I don't know how long more it's going to be, is a huge time. And especially for a child, it's huge formative learning years, They need to understand that there was a learning out of this problem also, and you actually came out heroes out of this. You put in a lot of effort and you've learned. So I think motivation and encouragement is going to be very important. We're also going to have, as already mentioned by most of us, obese kids. Physical activity, something that was naturally there, that plaything was there, but many of them today, because they've become obese, because, it's all, I think, about habit, they really don't want to come onto the playing field. So some are still very kinesthetic, but some are not. So we need to get these kids to the playing field, and there the challenge is, don't touch each other, wear your mask, or if you shouldn't be wearing your mask, which I think is advised by most when you're playing, then keep your distance. So we have actually already devised ways, which we tried, where probably it's just simple running. Don't play with any, you can't hold a racket, you can't hold a ball. So what you need to do is possibly yoga, you have to do your meditation, and you have to run. So we have to keep devising ways in which the children's obesity problems are met, the physical exercises are done, but then obviously with the COVID protocols, because we don't want kids to be falling ill. So I think these are the problems that we are going to face. So as leaders, we need to have our emotional, all our protocols all in place. We need to have people speaking to the children. We have to give the healing touch. We possibly have to, pump in more and more counselors, some maybe from outside, some we probably have to appoint more because we'll be needing many more people at different levels to be listening to the children. So basically there's one more very important thing that, we as administrators have to invest in, and also a paradigm shift, or I think it's a mindset change. All this while, I remember Geeta ma'am mentioning that, I used to tell the children about screen time, etc., only 1 hour, and see what's happening today. So those were the kind of talkings that we used to do with our children. Look, no mobiles, no screen time, no TV time. And today, what are we telling them? Look, you're supposed to be studying in front of the screen for 4 hours, 3 hours, 5 hours. It depends on the different classes and what the children can do. And the children were actually, now they've got used to it, were actually laughing behind our backs that this is the same lady who used to give us so many lectures about no screen time. Today, is happening on the screen. So our mindset will have to change, because education is now going to move, and should move rightly, to a blended format. Yeah. Devices are now going to come into schools. We are going to encourage, because we have invested and also seen the positives of online teaching. So the negatives are there, but there are huge positives. The connect in many ways has been much better. It's time saving. It's an all-weather school today, So if there is a DM's order of school closing down because there's bad weather or whatever, I can still teach the children and actually fill up those learning gaps. So it's going to be a blended format, for which devices is going to be a part of the children's lives. So once devices are going to come into school, then again, security, what's going to be recorded, where are the children going to be trolled, those typical adolescent issues, are going to come up in a very, very big way. So we need to be beefed up in schools to address these issues also, because things are going to change. In fact, I think we have all been speaking in the education sector that had the pandemic not hit us, what we have achieved today and what I can see in the hybrid and the blended model coming would not have happened, at least in the next 30 years. We have been pushed hard, and I'm glad we have been, though the ill effects are many, and there's a huge cost. We have been pushed 30 years ahead. And I'm happy, because we would have slept over some good changes that have also come in and will be coming into the education sector. So at the end of it, the healing touch, the emotional touch, what we know as the virtual hug today has to be changed into the physical hug with as much of protocol as, of course, we should be keeping. That's it.
Thank you so much to my panelists. It was really wonderful, but we have some time left, so I thought we could go through some of the questions that have come up during the session. Is that okay with all of you? Yeah, so we'll try to keep it very brief, and I'll try to direct the questions to the panelists who asked the questions, and some could be general. So if any of you would like to volunteer and answer those. The first question is to Geeta ma'am. Can you suggest some tips? Can you give us some suggestions on how parents and teachers can help children maintain a positive outlook during this time? So you mentioned the negative aspects of what we are actually observing now, but can you give us a few tips on how to maintain a positive outlook? Ma'am, your audio is...
Sorry about that. So maintaining a positive attitude is first analyzing a little bit, like stop, think and go sort. Stop and see what is happening. So you need to maintain a positive attitude when we are talking about it. One cannot have a positive attitude all the time. In a situation like this, it's very simple to say, think positive, stay positive, be positive. But if we actually as adults think about it, one cannot maintain this 24/7, 365 days. Okay? There will be times, acknowledge it. Acknowledge the fact that anxiety is coming. Carla Harraford, one of the persons who's written this book, Smart Moves, she used the acronym SOSO. I love it. S is stressed, O out, stressed out. SOH then is survival-oriented humans. So each one of us has that capacity to be able to stay positive. And some of the best methods is that thoughts are like clouds. So listen to the children. Do not tell them that this is negative, so push it out. Do not even use that term negative. Acknowledge that fact. In ACT, that is in action and acceptance and commitment therapy, we say accept that thought and make a commitment to move on. So if I am thinking that this negative thought, which is I want to remain positive, but I want to push it, it's going to come back to me with a double force. Instead of that, think of it as a cloud. No cloud remains in that same place all the time. Even Buddha believed in impermanence, that things which are there today will not be there tomorrow. Why tomorrow? Just the next hour, it will not be there. The wind which is blowing now in this direction, in the next hour, it's going to change. So accept that thought. Hello, thought, you have come in. I observe you're trying to pull me down. Hello, but I have better things to do. And what will that thought do then? It might remain there for a while, but if it is not acknowledged, if it is not encouraged, it will have to pass on. And Shruti ma'am has told many ways on remaining positive. I would just add to it that any form of expressive therapy works very well. So whether it is creating music with the things in the kitchen, it's creating an art piece. You don't have to be an artist to draw and create an art piece. Whether it is using puppets or like Amrita ma'am said, various ways she's thinking about for school children, even listening to stories or telling stories is a form of expressive therapy. So whether it is body percussion, I don't have an instrument at home, so how can I play music? Shruti ma'am said music, okay. Excuses is, I don't have music, I don't have instruments. Create this sound, and this sound is different, and this sound is different, and this is different. Have body percussion. So if people, children and adult, whether it's a teacher or a parent or a therapist or a teacher turned therapist or a counselor, deficiency needs are being taken care of by dietitians, like Sarika ma'am has said, and parents will give nutritious foods. Recovery needs will be done by the doctors who will give the supplements and those things. I think it is going to be the job of ours in my profession to look after the growth needs, because we cannot get stuck where we are. We have to move on. And if there comes a thought, which is, I don't use that word, acknowledge it. Hello, I have better things to do. That's it. And always look beneath the reason. If there is an anger outburst, if there is an anxiety attack, a panic attack, it is like the tip of the iceberg, which only 1/4 or 1/5 of it is seen. Look beneath it. What are the reasons that are causing that anger outburst? So is it in our control? Then we can help it. If it is beyond our control, then we need to explain to the adult or the child that if you cannot control it, just acknowledge it and move on. Because moving on is the only thing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. I will quickly run through a couple of more questions. Priyanka has asked, this is addressed to Amrita ma'am. Can you suggest some techniques through which teachers can help students in, particularly in the adolescence group? We heard about substance abuse also a little while back. So how can teachers help students in that group to cope with the emotional health during online classes? This is addressed to Amrita ma'am.
So I think, as I just mentioned, that adolescents in particular, because there's a lot of energy, and it's not only the energy, I think it's the hormonal changes that, they go through a very tough time. They really need a lot of listening. They need people to open their heart to, and most of the time, actually, they go for assistance to their peers, which is something that's again missing. And many a times, when they go to peers, they don't actually.
We missed the last part.
They usually go to peers for help. It's a very natural.
Amrita ma'am, I think your connection is slightly unstable. Could you just repeat the last part? We missed.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Right.
Yes, now we can.
That usually the young children, adolescents, go to their peers for assistance. That's where they look for their sounding board and they feel more comfortable sharing their problems with peers. Fortunately, unfortunately, some of them are smart enough, intelligent enough to give you good advice, but some are not, because actually they're also going through the same phase in their lives and may not give you very good advice. So as teachers, it's very important for us first to be able to notice in case a child is going through any problem. Some amount of training is always there for the teachers to be able to see changes in behavior, changes in, I've been really good in my studies and suddenly there's a downfall and it just keeps going down. It's not just that, you go down once and then you come up. That's okay, it happens. But when there's a slide and it's just going down, a child is suddenly very quiet in the class, doesn't speak, he's very withdrawn. So as teachers, we have to keep observing our children very well, offline or online. We have to keep seeing where the changes are there. Once you notice these changes, they have to be addressed. It's important that you may, kind of just start a conversation with the child. You don't have to start telling him what's going on in your life. I think Geeta ma'am would be able to tell that even better, how you actually converse, but you have to start checking out with the child. Do you want to talk to me? You want to say something? I thought we could have a little conversation. You just have to let them feel I'm there. Sometimes children don't open up the first time. It takes some sessions speaking to them, and then they feel that somebody is there to listen to me, and they come to the teachers, they speak to them. So there could be some certain things that the teachers can manage to handle on their own. But when it comes to substance abuse, it's very difficult for teachers to actually guide, students. So once you get to know that the child is in undertaking substance abuse, you have to immediately get in touch with the counselor. And counselors exactly know how to handle it when the parents have to be gotten. So it's obviously not a very good idea that the moment you flag a child and you know that there's a problem, you start talking to the parents, because the next time the child will never get in touch with you at all. So that trust is to be built between the teacher and the child continuously. This trust deficit should not happen. It cannot be broken. So these are the few ways. Basically, it's about giving a shoulder and listening to the child. A lot of help then can be given to the child.
The next question.
Can I just add one sentence to what ma'am has said?
Please go ahead.
What she said was absolutely correct. And I just want to add, it just needs an eagle's eye to keep looking for that those children, those adolescents where looking strong and being strong are two different things. So looking strong and whether they are being strong, that just needs an eagle's eye. Thank you. Sorry for that.
No, of course. Actually, now final question. This is slightly different because we have been now for past 10-15 minutes focused on what children are experiencing and helping them cope. Somebody has asked, Mariam has asked, what about teachers who have lost their jobs, who have lost the means to earn, and they are going through a lot of stress? So this is a general question. Any of the panelists can answer. What would be your advice to them? How can they go?
So I wonder if I can take that, because I think that's a lot related to schools. And unfortunately, we in fact have lost teachers So, you know, what we're doing is, we've also had kids who've lost their parents. So there's been a lot of problems this time in the second wave where people have lost. So if there's been a death of a teacher, if I think that was your question, then there is all kind of support that's been given to the family. Say, for example, most of the time, most of the teachers have their children studying with us, you know. So in any case, they're at very high concessions. But normally, if the teacher was not working with us, the concessions would stop, you know. But under these circumstances, it's a very, very sad state of affairs where you've lost somebody who's been working for you, even if it's been for a short time, but it's a loss to the teaching community. So the kids, all of them, you know, the cases that we've had, we have a large chain of schools. So all these kids have been promised and will be given a free education till the time that they pass out, they finish with their senior secondary school, you know, they complete, they're going to be given free education. The other thing is these kids, you know, where teachers have lost their lives, also need huge emotional support, because they've got absolutely shattered, you know. They could never imagine that this could happen to their parents. So again, on the emotional front, we've had our teachers calling them. If conditions have also been okay with the double mask, keeping the protocol, teachers have gone to their houses, spoken to them, tried to give them that feeling. You can't really replace a mother or a father, whichever way it is, but you can just tell them that I'm around in case you want to speak to me. I'm there at any stage, and especially in the initial stages when the child is still handling this grief. You just need to tell them at any time of the night also, because it's when you put your head on the pillow, that's the time that you keep thinking about so many things in your mind. But I'm there to speak to you. And teachers have actually given that helping hand. So it's on the emotional side and on the financial side that there has been complete support. The other thing is, if a child has lost his parents, they may not have been teachers with us, even those two, and especially if there's been an earning parent that you've lost, we've also we've already started giving free education to those children till the time they are there in the school. So this is the kind of assistance that I think the teaching fraternity has, or the education sector has really stood up, because we've really lost a lot of teachers this time.
Next, actually, we would like to conclude the session. But before that, I would ask all the panelists to give their concluding remarks. And if you could direct this from this one question: what have been your learning? But what has been your learning as as a counselor, as a doctor, as an administrator, as a nutritionist? What have been your learnings? If you could begin with Sarika, ma'am.
First of all, this session was really enlightening for me, even if I'm a part of the panel. It was so nice to listen to everyone speaking. If you talk about my learning from this, is that your health should be a priority all the time. It is not something that you care for on good days or bad days, you know. It should be your priority all the time. And the feeling of community, you know, being connected with people is important. So foster and maintain your relationships. We get too busy to make that phone call. So please do that. And don't postpone it for tomorrow, because we are living in such uncertain times that we don't know about tomorrow. So don't do that. Take a breather and do things for yourself, you know, not only for physically, for your mental and emotional self. There are so many people who have so many talents, but they don't have time to nurture their hobbies because they're too busy going to office. But do that and put yourself also first. You know, we always put everyone else first. So this is a time when you need to connect also, take care of your people also, but also yourself. So I think that is my learning, I would say. Especially with mothers, I would say that they always, even when I see a woman will cook for everybody, but most of the time when it is only her, she'll say, I'll adjust. she won't go the extra mile, you know. This is how we are. So I would say when you pack your nuts for your children or your husband, do it for yourself. Eat that fruit and eat those nuts for yourself also, because your health is of prime importance as much as everybody's health. So that is my takeaway from this pandemic.
Okay, Shruti ma'am. Thank you so much, Sarika ma'am.
I think the greatest lesson that COVID-19 has taught humanity is that we are in this together. It's affecting all of us together. And in the face of adversity, we have a choice. We can either be bitter or better. So we have to pick what we want to choose at this point of time. Nothing lasts forever. And how we accept the situation, behave appropriately in COVID preventive measures, and build our defenses in the form of immunity as well as immunization will really decide who will win this battle and who will succumb. See, all of us are very resilient. And I'm sure the pandemic will be soon a thing of the past, or at least I'm hoping that very soon it will be a thing of the past. But at this point of time, it is imperative that we remain focused, watchful, and yet prepared for whatever eventuality comes along.
Thank you, ma'am. Geeta ma'am.
Thank you for that. Just one big learning from this whole pandemic situation. I will say, with all my learning, I have also learned that I am not invincible. I'm available to help each and every one, but I am not invincible. And self-care, like Sarika ma'am said, is most highest priority list for me also, whether it is, like I said, playing the drums or doing body percussion or tamalpa or dancing or music or whatever it is, a mandala or a zentangle or a brain gym. So this can affect me also, and it can affect everyone. No one is out of it, vaccinated or not vaccinated. Okay, so this is something which is, an emotion is not good or bad. It just is. And we need to look after it. So whether we feed it or, what are we feeding? That is what is important. That is what I have learned. So if I'm going to feed negative thought, that is going to grow. If I'm going to look after myself with positivity, that I help myself and I help anyone else that I can, most available to it, and then that is what will grow and more strength then. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you for this wonderful session today. This is the final and fourth session of Thriving Thursdays, and thank you to all my panelists. I'm so sorry. Oh, sorry, ma'am. Sorry, yeah, I'm so sorry. Please go ahead. Please go ahead.
I'll make it
I'm
quick.
so sorry.
But, I think as an educator and even as a human being, my biggest learning in this pandemic of 1.5 years and some months has been that you always have to keep learning yourself. You have to be a learner. Because I think the amount I have learned personally in this time it's kind of been a sea change as a human being. Because though the pandemic has had its ups and downs, and we've spoken a lot about the downs, but I think things that I have learned is resilience, acceptance of everything, because you probably don't know what's better. You don't know what's coming up tomorrow. So you might as well accept what's there today and try and change what's there within your circle of influence. Then the fact that you have to value family connects. Somebody already spoke about it, but I think family connects have come up so beautifully this time. Something that I was also, keeping a little bit in the back burner has come up so beautifully. And I think one biggest learning has been austerity. It's so important to be austere. When you see suffering around you, you have to really keep your own needs low and understand that even in little you can manage. And I think if we haven't learned enough in this time of the pandemic, we've actually wasted 1.5 years. So the biggest learning has been be a learner yourself.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much. Really, there have been so many takeaways on this final session of Thriving Thursdays. And on behalf of Collins Learning, I would really like to thank each of the panelists today for your wonderful, wonderful insights. From Amrita ma'am, of course, we learned about what the pandemic actually entailed and in terms of what the stresses the teachers had to go through during this time, and how as an administrator, ma'am and many like her have come up with new strategies. So they've taken this opportunity to actually devise new ways of learning, and how this has taken us, in fact, 30 years forward, because we have accepted this challenge and we have chosen to answer the challenge and rise up to the challenge. And for sure, technology is here to stay, blended learning is here to stay, and how we can kind of counsel adolescents, students, teachers, and also how to deal with grief and loss. From Shruti ma'am, of course, we learned about what happens during this, what has happened during this time, what it means to caregivers, and how have they, the kind of challenges they have faced. And also in the second wave, as it ensues, and also if the third wave comes, when it comes, what are the signs to look out for? How can we take care of our children? And definitely one of the main key learnings for me is to avoid denial and to accept if we know that there is an infection, we have to go and seek medical counsel as soon as possible. Because in children, if we address the issues immediately, there is a high chance of recovery, and so therefore that is the most important learning from ma'am. And Geeta ma'am, of course, gave us wonderful strategies to cope with this pandemic and how to deal with stress. And as your from your learnings with interacting with children, how we can use simple things like body percussion. That's something I learned today, and how we can use these strategies and not to worry about things that we don't have. And use whatever we have, the tools, for instance, mandala art that you did the other day. How we can use these tools to engage our young people in the house and make an environment in the house that is conducive to learning, and also for them to be able to communicate to us, and definitely to avoid any sort of physical abuse, emotional abuse, which we might, do it unintended, but children actually have to suffer that. So I've learned that from, and of course, Sarika ma'am gave us wonderful insights into how we can improve our immunity, the vitamins that we need to ensure in our diet and in our intake, how we need to get moving. We shouldn't be couch potatoes. We have to get the half an hour of the sun. That is something I'm going to do from tomorrow. This is something I know, but we kind of miss out on it. Definitely to do that, and how to improve nutrition as a whole, and even beyond the pandemic. And of course, overall, we have also learned some strategies about how to cope once this is over. How do we integrate ourselves back into society? That is one common thread across the board. So thank you so much, dear panelists, for these wonderful insights, for sharing your knowledge that you have gathered over the years through your work over the years. And this is really an enlightening session for all of us. And on behalf of Collins Learning, I'd like to thank all of you from the bottom of my heart. And thank you so much. And I hope we get to see you, all of you, in future sessions.
Thank you. It's an absolute pleasure. And it was great listening to everyone, believe me.
Same here, same here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So much of learning.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Take care and stay safe.